So thanks everybody. I was sent by the ELCA because I am now on the National Church Council, and part of my platform for getting elected or whatever was to say I want more work to happen on climate justice action. So that's this was the beginning of that. So here's a not so great map of Brazil. It's the rainforest. So southern Brazil goes way down here, but you can see here's the Amazon River and the river that we were on, this tributary. Here's the city of Belém, which actually is a pretty large city. Manaus is back here in the further in the Amazon basin. And the Amazon has experienced a lot of deforestation. So one of the things that did come out of the United Nations meeting was better forest protection. But how it works, so the UN Framework on Climate Change has these conferences every year called COPs. It's Conference of the Parties, which basically means Conference of the Countries. All the countries are a party. This was a 30th year, and this was an important one because this was the 10th anniversary of the Paris Accords, which is when all the nations in Paris agreed. Pope Francis had just visited the US, I don't know if you remember, in 2015. All nations agreed to try to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And even if we overshoot, then to try to come back down to that. That's perceived as the safe level. So this was the 10th anniversary, and they really wanted a lot of faith groups to come. So that's what I was doing. It's a lot of, okay, so this, I just threw together slides from various organizations and a few of my own, but this is from Bill McKibben's organization, 350.org. What was different about this year's UN Climate Talks? Hint, it was all of us. And it was very participatory in the climate march. Other recent COPs had been in countries that don't allow big marches, but this one certainly did. So it was exciting. And there were so many indigenous people participating. That's the other big difference probably, because a number of indigenous communities came by canoe. I mean, it was really full of indigenous emphasis, even though they did not get everything by far that they would have wanted. They were at least part of the meeting, and it was very moving. Okay, so now here's some of my own slides. Okay, I'll just say I'm all hot and sweaty in all these slides. It was so hot. It was unbelievably hot and humid. So the hottest, like, you know, tchotchkes that you get are fans from various organizations to fan yourself constantly. And hats, although it wasn't as sunny, it was just oppressively humid. But anyway, this is my Lutheran World Federation hat. Water bottles with the logos. I can pass these around if you want. Anyway, there's a lot of, you know, kind of branded stuff that I got. But it was really hot. But it was just so moving to be in this climate march. And this is a group of farmers. You can see a sustainable future is what their hats say. I was marching with B. Moorhead from Texas Impact is the name of the organization. So Susan, it would be like Faith Action Network. It's the ecumenical faith groups in Texas who all get together and lobby in their state legislature. But they also brought a video crew, so she was great. Anyway, people would just stop us and, you know, say, can we tell you about our farms and can we tell you about our life? The climate march was really festive and really fun. Indigenous, incredibly significant in the climate march. Some of them got badges. Well, I guess everybody's wearing COP 30 shirts, whether or not you were officially badged. I was only badged for 1 week. It was really hard to get an official badge, so I shared it. I was the second week on somebody else's badge who had it the first week, and the indigenous did not get nearly as many badges as they should have. So that's part of why, if you read about that they had stormed the venue at one point, they were upset that they weren't included more. But they're very important. Anyway, it was really moving to see them and the churches that they're involved with. This is the Lutheran World Federation group. Here's a bishop from the Church of Sweden, Bishop Andreas Holmberg, and then all these young people from Lutheran World Federation. You can see no climate justice without debt justice. A lot of the focus at this meeting was on funds for what they call loss and damage, which is nations that have already been harmed, and then funds for adaptation to help countries that don't have irrigation. I mean, everything that countries have to do to adapt, but it's the poorest people, the most vulnerable in the world, who suffer the most. So a lot of focus on trying to get more funding for climate finance, adaptation, and debt. This is just to say the indigenous communities from around the world came. So this is West Papua. This one is very moving to me because I know about Papua New Guinea, but I didn't, save our indigenous forests. The indigenous peoples from all around the world were there, very powerful. And faith communities. So for you Catholics, the big, and this, I only have 2 women in this picture, but it's the Laudato Si movement. Very strong movement based on Pope Francis's encyclical, which was called Laudato Si. There's a whole now a global climate movement among Catholics called the Laudato Si movement, and they were very strong. Oh, it's in Latin. It means I praise you, and it was what Saint Francis, when he wrote the Canticle to the Sun, or Canticle of the Sun. I praise God, O brother sun, sister moon. So Pope Francis named it Laudato Si because Latin is, the Vatican's language. But yeah, it's based on Saint Francis, and Pope Francis wrote that. But it's a great movement. So. And then this is in Portuguese. The Catholics from, I guess it's all the global community, I think maybe. The Anglicans were really impressive also. They had been part of an ecumenical event prior, and I wasn't there in time because I wasn't badged, but it was called Tapiri, which was to really work with indigenous communities to talk about what is needed the most. And it was a whole year-long movement. But what was very moving to me is they were holding these banners, all of which are pictures of climate martyrs. So I have a slide of what's his name? Anyway, it's my problem, can't remember names. But, and then it was very moving that then the next day at the worship service, I wonder if that's what I have next. Yeah, they carried these into worship. Okay, so this is one who got mentioned a lot. Sister Dorothy Stang was a United States Roman Catholic sister who was killed for her environmental work. And they mentioned her a lot in presentations. And Chico Mendez is the one whose name I couldn't remember, and others. But you saw the number of those banners. All of these are climate activists or environmental activists in the Amazon who were killed. It's a very violent kind of situation as farmers become squatters and try to take land and then kill the people that are opposing it. Okay, so yeah, Dorothy Stang, Chico Mendez, and then this is the Anglican Church where we worship the next day. And so see, they carried in those banners. That was what was really powerful. This is the same things that were in the Climate March now become the banners in the church service. And this is Regina Banks, who works for the California equivalent of Faith Action Network. She's an ELCA advocacy person. Okay, now if I just press arrow, it'll play, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know how to turn up the volume.
Churches, we formally adopted by the member churches of the world the ecumenical decade of climate justice action.
Nós adotamos formalmente esse documento que é chamado a Década Ecumênica de Ação por Justiça
I think we should go louder.
Climática.
The World Council, yes, you may clap. Please, please.
Por favor, podem aplaudir.
I am pleased to say the World Council of Churches is always timely and relevant around the trends that happen in our world. We have had decades in solidarity with women.
Nós já tivemos décadas de solidariedade com as mulheres,
against violence,
contra a violência,
and against racism.
contra o racismo.
And now we say climate justice brings all of that together for this moment.
Okay, that's a short clip that, so the World Council of Churches is what we're going to be talking about, that climate justice decade with Jim, the resolution we've been working on. Our presiding bishop, Curry, also issued a message for the 10th anniversary of the Paris Climate Accords for this meeting, saying it's not too late to protect our climate. With God, it's never too late. Kairos means this is an opportune and urgent time. So that's what we're going to be working on with you with this resolution. Here's Pope this is Pope Leo. Sorry. No, but he sent this video.
Creation is crying out in floods, droughts, storms, and relentless heat. 1 in 3 people live in great vulnerability because of these climate changes. To them, climate change is not a distant threat, and to ignore these people is to deny our shared humanity. There is still time to keep the rise in global temperatures below 1.5 degrees centigrade, but the window is closing. As stewards of God's creation, we are called to act swiftly with faith and prophecy to protect the gift he entrusted to us. The Paris Agreement has driven real progress and remains our strongest tool for protecting people and the planet. But we must be honest. It is not the agreement that is failing. We are failing in our response. What is failing is the political will of some. True leadership means service and support at a scale that will truly make a difference. Stronger climate actions will create stronger and fairer economic systems. Strong climate actions and policies, both are an investment in a more just and stable world.
Okay, so that was the climate march was on the Saturday after I got there, then the worship service on Sunday, and these messages were coming in because the second week of negotiations was absolutely crucial. They had to do more. Everybody had to get more ambitious in what the nations of the world would agree to do. It's totally voluntary on their part. They each bring their own national commitment, and they don't have to do anything. So it's just peer pressure that gets anybody to do anything. So that's why these messages matter. So this was Monday morning then in the venue. I went to a plenary session with Ana Tony, the president of COP30. The Brazilian government was great. They had done a lot to try to say what we need in this. The Belém agreements is an agreement to phase out fossil fuels, and it's a phase out, and they were lobbying for a lot stronger language than what actually happened. But I think some things that happened were very important, like forest protections. And then, as everybody says, we'd have to just keep working next year. And in the interim, there will be a conference of governments to talk about fossil fuel phase out, because that's what ultimately the Saudi Arabians and the Russians and others at petrostates refused to allow in. And everything's by consensus, so that did not get into the final agreement. But Brazil worked really hard for it. One way they did that was what was called the Global Ethical Stock Take. And that was an interesting process the prior year, where they had people in all the continents really work on sort of ethical questions in their own context. In the US, it was Karenna Gore, Al Gore's daughter, who runs the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Seminary. She convened the North American group with a lot of indigenous leaders as well. So the idea of bringing ethics in is important, I think. And the president of the COP talked about we need more moral imagination. So it was really good that faith communities had a role in terms of this ethical and moral imagination.
A question.
Uh-huh.
How on earth can this group face the difficulties that are posed by this intransigent administration? I mean, I just see it almost as hopeless, but it's not, but it seems that way.
You mean in the United States?
Yes.
Well, I'll talk about that in a minute, because I was on this panel with one of the former Biden negotiators named Trig Talley, and he's in this organization called We Are All In. And so deliberately, a lot of, even though the Trump administration was not there, the State Department wasn't there, governors were there, mayors were there. I guess our mayor wasn't there, but you could have. Anyway, big city mayors. Yeah, it's so the idea, and what Trig Talley says is in total, the organization, the government entities represented by We Are All In, which is states, counties, municipalities, that represents 75% of the American population. So that's what he would say, and is that we have to, even though nothing's going to happen at the federal level these next 3 years, we have to keep moving at the state, local, and every other level to keep organizing, and then to hope that change happens in the elections. But I mean, the message was there's no alternative. It's never going to be too late. Climate isn't a cliff that you fall off of, it's a slope, and we've got to stop things at, well, we're over 400 parts per million now, but then we got to stop at 420, and then we can walk it back by sequestration. Jim maybe knows more than me, but we can't lose hope because there's no alternative. So that's I guess what I would say. So anyway, let me just say, so we go into the venue and it was like a feast of things to go to. I'm really sad I didn't go to this one. They had a fiction author, Kim Stanley Robinson, doing one on his novel, The Ministry of the Future. But others, I mean, there's just tons of stuff to go to. Eric?
That book is probably the best book I read last year. It's a really, really hopeful book about addressing climate change challenges, so I'd really recommend it.
And it's a novel, right? So it's this idea of helping your imagination envision a future. Yeah, thank you. Anyway, this is just a sample. Every day they had these on the board. This is just the things that are going to happen at 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And only the official things. Interesting, that was officially organized by UNFCCC, whereas what I was in was a side event that had other organizers in it. Okay, so I just went around to stuff, like one about food. This one was great. So they had a whole food, roots, and routes pavilion. And then you go hear about what farmers are doing, because they don't have irrigation most places in the world. So farmers are having to really deal with drier climates and then floods and stuff. But they sit down and talk together about what you can do about crops. And it was very inspiring. So there's a whole food area and farming area. Then there was, I just threw this one, there was a health area too, but this is actually from a PowerPoint that Jim put together for the ELCA climate message about health effects. So there were a lot of medical people there, doctors, public health people. Yeah, climate change is a huge public health problem. And you can see with, the heat-related things. And definitely I came to realize how extreme heat can kill you. Although I obviously... Okay, then there was the Nordic countries and the whole permafrost issue. But notice, this was really interesting. The Cryosphere Pavilion also has Chile. I guess I didn't realize, but it's glaciers everywhere that are part of the cryosphere that are threatened. So the countries that have glaciers sit down together and teach you about that. Really interesting. And then these kids from Norway, Norwegian Children's Panel on climate change. It was really fun to go to all this stuff. And then there were, out in the hallway where the delegates had to pass by, there were always sort of skits and stunts going on. So this one was, I think this was sponsored by ACT Alliance here, which is an organization that we are in. Action for Churches Together is ACT. And they're throwing money on the floor to try to, make a skit about how we've got to step it up on climate finance. And then there were children's rights people. I guess I didn't put in the animals that you saw. If you read the newsletter article, here I am being hugged by some kind of a stuffed animal. Well, not a stuffed animal. It was a person in an animal costume. Oh, this is the Action for Churches Together, Act Now for Climate Justice. You see there's a lot of young people. It was really good enthusiasm to try to wake people up. And then I also was in on some of these video interviews. This is the Texas Impact State group. This is Bea Moorhead, who heads it. Then her husband happens to work for PBS in Austin, Texas. So he took some time out, but he's a really good videographer. And then, so I helped do the interviews. This is a woman from Colombia. She is great, Sara Lara Gonzalez, talking about her work with the Lutheran World Federation with women, and also that Colombia has committed to try to transition away from fossil fuels, which is very impressive for a country that is a fossil fuel country, but they're going to leave it in the ground, and that was very impressive. And then, of course, the indigenous networks and stuff. It was very moving to meet with different indigenous communities. And this whole indigenous principles of a just transition, I think I brought a little booklet here if any of you want it. I can pass this around if you want, but it's whatever. People can look at all my, various souvenirs here if you want. Oh, from the Cryosphere people, I like this t-shirt that I got at the Finnish Pavilion, COP30 Finland, Cool by Nature. And it was very moving. The people from the Finland Pavilion said, look, in the winter, our country is so dark, we need snow on the ground to help it be lighter, just psychologically, which I hadn't thought about until this rainy season here when we lost our snow. Okay, so this is the panel that I was on then. I think it was the third day I was there. This is for faith-based partnerships advancing Paris Agreement in the United States. So these all represent this is our, Christine Moffat is our Washington, D.C. policy person for climate and energy with the ELCA. And then Reverend Eugene Cho, I hope everybody's a member of Bread for the World. He was great. And Bread for the World does so much advocacy about hunger. If you watch PBS, you see that Rick Steves always is doing ads for Bread for the World. They're excellent. And then I guess I could have said Faith Lutheran Church, but I put my seminary. And then there was a Presbyterian Catholic Relief Services. This guy was great. Both of these two, the Roman Catholics working in the field with farmers to help them adjust to climate change or adapt, but also working with local people. So it's all, even though it says Catholic Relief Services, it's really more development. All of our organizations are. And then this is Trig Talley, who was the U.S. negotiator. Oops, I guess he's off the screen. From America is All In. And he was the government person who said to us, look, you know, he was 15 years, I think, negotiating for the U.S. government, and suddenly now he's there just as an observer like the rest of observers. But he says, don't lose hope. It's going to change, and the U.S. will be back in the game. But meanwhile, we have to do all we can to implement the Paris Accords even without the U.S. government. I mean, because the whole key with the Paris Accords is we've got to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And that's what we agreed to. All right, so over to you, Jim, pretty soon. Our goal, the goal of Jim and me,
Yeah, mostly
and former Bishop Ann Svenningson, and I can hand these out. I didn't make a lot of copies of this, but we're going to try to galvanize the ELCA for climate action via
Let me have one of them.
leveraging this through the World Council of Churches decade. So it's a little bit of a, it's just one very narrow path to try to get the ELCA to do climate action, but I think it can work. So here's our sample resolution that we're going to have as many synods pass and congregations to pass on to their synods as possible. I don't have copies for everybody because it's still not a final draft here. Jim and I and Ann are going to work on it on Tuesday. But it's just the idea that the way change happens in the ELCA is by congregations, then synods, sending things to the church council and the church-wide assembly, and then we act on it. So, and here's my last slide, but we can go back to this one. It's not too late. That's the message I want to say. This is just a book that has that title that I really like. So it's, in my view, not too late for ELCA climate organizing, drawing on the 2023 climate message, which is what Pastor Aaron has done talks with us on. And Jim was here a year ago, and he was one of the writers of it. And we're going to join with Synods, Lutherans Restoring Creation, and others to vote for a synod resolution, we hope. So just pull the lever and vote yes. Okay, Jim, over to you.
I would like to add something that's very relevant in this country. As you know, John was regional forester with the U.S. Forest Service.
Do you want to come up here, Susan, so you can get on the, here, go lean into me and be on my microphone. How's that?
Oh, okay.
Just cuddle up.
Okay. As you probably know, John was regional forester with the U.S. Forest Service, and he retired in the 1990s as regional forester. And during that time and before that time, he was very involved in planning for natural resources in this country and for preserving our public lands in this country. Our public lands are in danger now of being taken over for development, gas exploration, oil exploration. So I would like to tell you to please be aware of that. And Maria Cantwell, our senator, is promoting legislation to protect our public lands. She needs to hear from all of us and all of our representatives. So please contact them and tell them to do everything they can to protect our public lands, keep them from being exploited.
Thank you.
Is this Barbara, is this a memorial to the national church, or is this for our synod?
We'll tell you. We will tell you all about it. It's coming. It's going to be, it has to start with the congregation, then it'll go to the synod, then it will go national. But it has to be those steps.
And then ideally coming from multiple congregations and multiple synods. So just as a church, that's how things work, is they percolate up from the base. So we are, in the beginning was the Word, and Lutherans really took that seriously. We like words. There's but as a church, we have really excellent social teaching documents on abortion, the death penalty, economic justice, etc. And then we have social messages on more timely topics like Earth's climate crisis. And the reality is those go out there, they live on the internet. Sometimes pastors like Aaron lead discussions of them. But frankly, too often they just sort of languish on the shelf. And I think this is part of what you're getting at, Alex, is there's a lot of words happening in Brazil. There's a lot of words on these two pieces of paper. What difference does it make? But at the end of the day, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And then I forget how the rest of it goes. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, those are pretty darn important words, and they reside in a very important document. So we shouldn't underestimate the importance of words and statements like this that ultimately get appropriated. Of course, it's not sufficient. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, right? We have to embody these words. We have to help them live in specific ways. But the purpose of this resolution is for the ELCA, as a member church of the World Council of Churches, to affirm the World Council of Churches, not just affirm, but implement, and participate in this decade of climate action. And the WCC has, for multiple years, as the speaker on the screen lifted up, they had a decade for gender justice, for condemning violence in all of its forms, for challenging racism. And now the World Council of Churches is saying we need to give a full decade of moral attention to the challenges posed by climate change, because it's only getting worse.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I was going to just try to show the picture. Okay, apologies.
That's as much dancing as I'll do.
No, say more. So Alex, sorry. Yeah, on the back, our idea is on page 4, it would be passed by a congregation and signed by our representative council president and then sent on to the synod, we hope. And of course, congregations could tweak it, but we hope that many, many congregations in many, many synods will pass it, and it'll get the attention of because here's the deal, the ELCA has really observed these other decades with a lot of staff and budget, the decade for women, the decade against violence, decade against racism. But now they don't have as much budget and staff. And so we want to say you've got to
challenge the church.
Yeah, challenge the church to do it. And we do have in here, just to let you know, with deep pockets, and this was Bishop Ann that put this in, the last resolve is at the bottom of page 3, the ELCA shall launch a fundraising campaign, Climate Justice Action for the Life of the World, with the goal of raising at least $1 million to help.
Concrete programs dedicated to greenhouse gas reduction.
So, everything's not going to happen that is in here, but we want our congregation to boldly ask the ELCA. Actions,
which you guys are, I was just reminding you, right? You guys have taken concrete action. That's I think, an example of the kind of stuff. So these things are, they begin with a series of whereases that sort of establish a sort of history of attention to a particular topic, in this case, climate change. And so I'm not going to read, it's not pedantic to kind of go through all that, but I think it does pretty exhaustively go through that. I forget, it was in 2022, that third whereas, 17 of the ELCAs, is it 65 synods, Bob, or are we less than that? Had memorials or resolutions to the church-wide assembly regarding greenhouse gas emissions. And so that's sort of the hope with something like this, is we could get 17, 20 synods that will kind of carry this ball forward, and then hopefully that leads to congregations participating in the various sorts of tools that the World Council of Churches will develop to help people of faith address climate change over the course of a decade. And then within the ELCA with that $1 million fund. Alex?
I'm surprised that only 17 or so were able to pass this forward. What do you perceive to be the reason why so many synods are not able to pass this forward?
Well, I don't know enough about what in each of those synods. I can speak from my own personal experience about writing the social message on climate change. And I had an extensive back and forth interaction with a pastor in North Dakota where most of his parishioners are employed by firms who are engaged in fossil fuel extraction or refining. And from his perspective, anything about climate, or he was saying from their perspective as his parishioners, this talk about climate change imperils their financial futures because, if we're going to leave it in the ground, well, then you don't need to pay someone to suck it out of the ground. And you certainly don't need to pay someone to refine it. So I think that's that, and then just in our unfortunate political ethos, climate change is regarded as a blue issue, and which is ridiculous. I mean, Republicans and Democrats alike were just affected by this atmospheric river that you dealt with. Karen and I live in Decorah, Iowa. We've experienced 100-year floods 8 years apart. These atmospheric rivers are arriving far more frequently than scientists projected. So it affects all of us, and I think it's just taken a while for people to kind of realize that. That's a quick response, Alex.
Well, I could just say 17 is actually a lot. I don't know of
Yeah,
any
it
synod
is.
that voted it down. It's just that it didn't get introduced into the other ones. So that's why we have to make sure it gets introduced in our synod. And hopefully, we're hoping for maybe 20 synods. Some don't even have a synod assembly this year, like Northwest Washington doesn't, but it can go to the synod council. But this doesn't get voted down. It's just that it didn't get brought forward. So it's all about grassroots organizing. But I can say from being on the National Church Council now, we're going to do a new message or a statement, I can't remember, on farming, because only 3 synods asked for it. So what the church council does is stuff that comes from synods, even if it's not very many. That's how the action happens. So I'm very hopeful that this can pass if several synods and congregations have to get it to the synod. If that will pass, we will do it. And I think the money is there also. At least Bishop Ann is very confident, and it seems like it's something that people would be happy to give to. A lot of people would.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think personally, I spent most of my life as a college professor, and most of my students care about climate change. Most of them are also in despair about climate change because it feels like they're screwed. There's nothing that can be done. And then when they come to church, I think it's seldom the case that they're in a church service or in an adult forum like this where people are talking about what they are existentially in great anxiety about. So from my perspective, I think these are words worth uttering because the upcoming generations, this is the whole cake for them. This is it. So, we may as well address we need to address all of these issues, gender justice, reproductive rights, imperialism, and unjustified war. Because if we don't, I think we will continue to be regarded as irrelevant by the next generation, by generations to come. So I think it's well worth it, but you have to walk the talk. And that's part of what this says as well, is it's not just about telling Uncle Sam what Uncle Sam should do. We need to do what we're telling Uncle Sam to do. So if we tell Uncle Sam to cut emissions 50% by 2030, well, as a church, all expressions of the ELCA, we need to have plans and strategies to accomplish that.
Which we did with our solar panels. That's what Jim pointed. So I'll just say on page 3, all of these specifics are straight out of the climate message. So none of this is new. These are just commitments we already made, but oops, we kind of forgot about or whatever. So we
Well, they
brought
just sit
those
on a shelf
Yeah,
until-
there's okay. They sat on the shelf, yes, but it's not. So these are nothing is new here, and our kind of our argument in this is the stuff that we've already committed to in the climate message and that we've done for other decades with the World Council of Churches. Let's do with this one. So hopefully the annual meeting on January 25th can pass it. If you have suggestions for editing changes that need to be done, Jim and I are meeting, as I said, Tuesday with Bishop Ann Svenningson, and we've sent it out to a number of reviewers in Bishop's and whatever. So we welcome your feedback, but it's a pretty narrowly focused little strategy here to just say, get the ELCA on board with the World Council of Churches Decade of Climate Justice Action, which is just one little thing, but I think it's the way we can leverage a lot more to happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any collaboration locally or, in the United States going on with power companies like RPE, like the people that are out there doing the day-to-day work of providing power?
Yeah.
Is there a connection? Is there a bridge? How can it be?
Yeah, there is. I mean,
That's what Jim works on. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Like I said, I was a college professor for 28 years and parish pastor for 3 years before that. And then over the course of my time at Luther College made some investments in renewable energy. And that got us involved with responding to some issues at the Iowa Utilities Commission. And so as a result, I've kind of wound up in that world. But I can tell you that at least in our state, Iowa's not regarded as a particularly progressive state. But our largest electric utility, Mid-American Energy, is a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway. But they got really smart early on and they realized, oh, there's a 1.5 cent per kilowatt hour federal tax credit. And they kind of fought that tooth and nail, and then they kind of realized, we just signed a contract with a wind farm to buy all of their production for 20 years at a fixed price. No fuel cost. And we can tap this federal tax credit. And the company turned on a dime from being mostly coal to rapidly getting out of coal. Now, they still own coal, and it's still a problem for us in Iowa. But that company, Mid-American, now has lots of data centers and other big corporate accounts that are located in Iowa because they want to be able to tell their shareholders or their customers that everything's 100% green. And that's pretty true. It's not entirely true, but it's it's a lot more green than it used to be, right? So there's that. And then there's the utility that serves our neck of the woods in Northeast Iowa, Alliant Energy. And they weren't quite as proactive. But they have now figured out, we have aging infrastructure, it needs to be replaced. The best way to replace it is with renewables. And so they can still make serious coin from doing it, but the planet is better off, and they're making major investments. I'm involved in a docket right now for 1,000 megawatts of wind at $3 billion total investment. That's a big chunk that hopefully doesn't flow back to ratepayers as much because of the federal tax credits. So I think there are some really good forward-looking companies that are driving investment in renewables. And then you have the federal government telling operators of coal plants that are scheduled to be retired, no, you have to keep operating. And that's serious money that's being paid. And right now, the federal government is dropping that bill in the lap of the ratepayer. It's not a burden being borne by the federal taxpayer. It's by that local ratepayer. So it's just ironic to me that here you have utilities trying to move in this direction, and they're actually being thwarted at the federal level in that way. So I see a lot of good things happening, and corporate America has been a big part of that. Big part of the problem too, no question about it, but also a big part of the solution.
And I'll just say the best book I read, Andy, is this year is Here Comes the Sun by Bill McKibben, who talks about how we shouldn't even talk about solar, wind, and batteries now as alternative. They are renewables and they're the cheapest way to generate.
absolutely, yeah.
So if the coal plant has to spend more to keep a coal plant going than they would on wind, that's the game changer that's really just happened in the last several years. Renewables are now the cheapest way to generate electricity. Sorry, Andy.
I was going to say, in the question about is there hope, or what's the path out of this? There's a Netflix documentary that's called The Future, and it's by Bill Gates, and it's like 5 parts. But the one on climate change takes a systems approach to where do all the emissions in the world come from, what technologies are being developed in each of those sectors to get beyond the emissions problems that we have today. And it's hopeful because you learn about a lot of technologies that are in development, but it also gets you grounded in how long it's going to take to get there, because we are still developing the technologies, and once you have the technologies, they take a long time to get adopted. So we're talking about wind that has been in an adoption cycle for decades. The thing that will replace cement, which is one of the biggest contributors to the emissions in the world, they haven't exactly got what they're going to do to replace how they produce cement. And so when they get it, then you've got this long adoption cycle. It's a very interesting 45 minutes. So again, it's The Future with Bill Gates. It's a 5-part series, but the one on climate change is quite good if you just want to think about how big is the problem, what are they doing to make changes in all those segments.
I think we showed that here, didn't we? That segment, I forget. I will say, Mark Jacobson, though, at the Solutions Project at Stanford, thinks that already there's all the technology we need in terms of wind, solar, and battery. I mean, obviously, concrete is really important, but that he's already got a model that every country in the world could shift totally off of fossil fuels. So it's a both, obviously, but that's because technology has gotten so good for solar panels and wind turbines and everything in such recent times. Well, we should probably let people go, right?
Thank you, guys.
But let's talk more. Thank you. And hopefully the congregation will pass this on January 25th so we can send it on up. Thank you. And I want to thank Aaron for helping me with the movies and my slideshow. He's the one who did all the video clips so they could come in here and I would just press the button and then it would start playing.
God bless you, Aaron. She used to call me.
Thank you.